What's up, weirdos? I'm Felicia and I like scary movies, and it is finally Candyman week. I'm so excited. I feel like we've been waiting for Nia DaCosta's Jordan Peele's Candyman for so long, and it's finally coming out this Friday. And so I thought to celebrate, I would take a look at Candyman 1, 2, and 3 and post just kind of, I don't even want to say reviews, but just little chats about these movies. So I'll go ahead and say I had seen the first Candyman, big fan, but the second and third one I watched for the first time this past weekend, and so surprising in so many ways. But today we're just focusing on the first one. So Candyman came out in 1992. You know how people are always like, oh, before Scream, what was even going on in horror in the 90s? And it's just like Candyman. It was written and directed by Bernard Rose, but it was actually based on a short story by Clive Barker, which I did not know, and that was called The Forbidden. Now, if you don't know what this movie's about, it takes place in Chicago and follows a grad student named Helen who is starting to study urban legends and ends up focusing in on the Candyman. Now, the Candyman is a sort of boogeyman character that when you say his name 5 times in a mirror, he appears and kills you using his hook for a hand. Helen is looking at the effect of the Candyman legend on the residents of the housing project called Cabrini Green. And you know what? Turns out she gets a little too close and Candyman has to pay her a visit. Now this movie is freaking awesome for so many reasons. I'm just gonna start with thinking about 1992, the year I was born. Now, if you look at the popular horror movies that were coming out from like the mid 70s up until the early 90s, we typically have a lot of young white teenagers running away from some sort of slow walking monster that's gonna come get you. We were at a point where slashers were becoming very formulaic, and this movie did things very differently. First of all, we're dealing with adults who are dealing with adult issues. It's looking at bigger themes such as race and social issues. It takes place in the city, an urban setting where we already suspect bad things happen, versus a lot of horror movies that take place in the suburban town where nothing bad ever happens. Now we're taking a boogeyman, a supernatural creature, and putting it against a backdrop that people already have a fear about. But I think the thing that really makes this movie stand out is that it's doing a lot of complicated things while also being a standalone, well-made horror film. Let's just break down a couple of these elements real quick. So first of all, with our characters, we have Tony Todd playing our boogeyman, our Candyman. He is obviously a great actor, and the character itself has a tragic history. The character says, "Be my victim," but has also been a victim. He has a hook for a hand, which I think most people recognize as a piece of urban legend from our own like hometowns. Like I feel like the guy with a hook for a hand is very, like, it's even on SpongeBob. Like it's a very common urban legend. And then he's even given additional imagery with this bee thing. First of all, people are terrified of bees, so they're already scary, and in this movie they're associated with a horrible death of Candyman. And then you have how you call upon him. You have something that is an active action that you as an audience member could literally do at home. Look into a mirror and say Candyman 5 times. Raise your hand if you looked in a mirror in your youth and said Bloody Mary 3 times. Me? Constantly? Why was I always doing that? Okay, basically what I'm saying, this character is genius because you have a layer of familiarity of classic urban legend stuff that we all probably grew up on in some way or another, and then you have these more complicated themes on top of that, and then you have a really good actor. So yay. And then you have Helen, who is a strong female character. She's a grad student, she's doing research, she is smart, she is skeptical, and she is brave, and sometimes a little too brave. Now there is this sort of question that I don't know if this was coming up at the time or not, but something that I've seen people talk about in recent years, which is kind of this idea of Helen playing this kind of white savior character in this movie, and not to mention that the creators of this movie are white. So I think we have to think about that as well, but I don't think we have to deny that this is a great movie, and Helen is an awesome character. I also have to give a shout out to Cassie Lemons, who plays Bernie, who's Helen's thesis partner, and doing a lot of this work with her. She's great in this movie. She was also in Silence of the Lambs 2 years before this, which, by the way, actually has a lot of similarities to this movie that I had not really considered, but Lauren just watched Candyman for the first time, and Silence of the Lambs is her favorite movie. Lauren from my podcast, Sinister Sisters, if that was confusing. And she noticed that there's a lot of similarities between these movies, and I thought, wow, you're kind of right. And then I also have to say that Kasi Lemmons also directed Eve's Bayou, which is a underrated, not a horror film, but like thriller with horror elements for sure. So she's an awesome actress, director. She's great. And the main similarity I see between those movies is this sort of mutual obsession between heroine and monster. So of course in Silence of the Lambs we have Hannibal Lecter and Clarice, and in this movie Helen and Candyman are sort of equally obsessed with each other. Like, she is trying to kind of research, get all the story, find evidence that he doesn't exist, and he becomes obsessed with her because for Candyman to exist, people need to believe in him. Like, that's classic boogeyman, right? And she's saying, not real, and he's like, well, wanna bet? Let's talk about it, or scream about it, or die about it, whatever. But yes, there is this mutual obsession, and sometimes almost romance between them that we don't see in a lot of like more popular horror franchises. We see it a little in Nightmare Before Elm Street, but I don't really think we see it in the Halloween movies or the Friday the 13th movies. Like, it's pretty much people running from the monster and not necessarily seeking him out. Where in Candyman, she is seeking him out. She wants to know more. She calls upon him. I know, yeah. Something else, which is, you know, very important. The kills, the gore, the practical effects in this are excelente. We have that psychiatrist being gutted up the middle. We have Candyman opening his coat and revealing this rib cage full of bees. Like, we have like all this great gore that is just like so well done. And it's kind of a mix of the supernatural and of the everyday terror. For example, when Helen wakes up in Anne-Marie's apartment and the dog is dead and there's blood everywhere and Anne-Marie tries to like fight her because she thinks she's stolen her baby. Like, that whole scene is like not normal horror movie, ooh, scary gore. It is like tragic, sad, scary. And those moments of that feel like reality, like a reality in this building, and then having supernatural horror come out in other ways in the movie is so effective. It gets us emotionally while also giving us the cathartic release that horror movies give us. Now, in terms of racial and social issues in this movie, I'm not the best person to talk about it because obviously I'm coming from a white perspective, but I do want to mention one thing I was thinking about today, and that is we have kind of two fears in this movie that they are playing with. One of Candyman, aka, you know, the boogeyman, more supernatural, and then two, the white fear around housing projects and people of color and going into these areas and thinking that you're going to get shot or thinking they're particularly dangerous. And so you have kind of both of those things happening, and both of those fears presented in this movie are due to racism. Obviously, the Candyman fell in love with a white woman and was murdered for it. And then on the other side, you have the racism and classism going on with the fear around this housing project. And in addition, the racism that went into letting that housing project go into disarray over time. But yeah, there's a lot there, and once again, I'm not the best person to talk about it, but it's something I was thinking about today. And yeah, just like the fact that both of the things that are supposed to be scary in this movie are caused in sitting on a bed of racism. I feel like I could kind of go on all day long, but I think I'm just gonna say one more thing, is that I love the end of this movie. I just love that Helen, after she dies, you know, saving this baby covered in burns, like this epic death, epic. She gets to become the vengeful ghost in the same way Candyman is. Like, her boyfriend, who was definitely cheating on her from the beginning of the movie, has like moved in with his student and they've changed her whole house and whatever. And like, we have this epic vengeance scene at the end from Helen. And it's just like, ooh, There's something about that. Like woman seeking monster becomes monster. But really good stuff. Obviously this movie's awesome. I am so excited to see the new one. I'm thrilled. I can't wait. Tomorrow I will talk about Candyman 2, Farewell to the Flesh. And that's it. If you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a nice scream. Bye.